What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with your Packers Daily Chat on Cheesehead TV, coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are wherever you are because we are devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide, including trolls who come onto our chat hours before and talk gibberish for whatever reason. But it's good to see everybody. Always good to be mixing it up with fine folks on the internet. Obviously, the title of this chat has provoked some response. Basically, I'm just saying, let Mark Murphy do his job. If you are unhappy with how he's doing it, I understand it. But to call this gross derelict of duty, he's going to ruin the Packers, etc. Can we let him make a hire first before we declare that the new structure is going to destroy the Packers organization, etc., etc.? I understand history. I understand the mantra of the closer the business side is to the football side throughout history that has not gone well for the Packers. But, Ron Wolf and Bob Harlan did what they did at a very different time in a very different NFL. Mark Murphy is trying to push the Packers organization into the present, not even into the future. Let's just relax on the downfall of the Packers organization. And the idea that I'm carrying water for Mark Murphy is absolutely hilarious. All I'm saying is, let it play out. You say, you're happy with this. I'm not happy with anything. I don't know what's happening. I have to see decisions get made. The man has been put in this position throughout many, many years of life leading up to this moment. It's not a coup. He didn't usurp power from everybody. He always had it. He decided to take action when he removed Ted Thompson, inserted himself as the head of football, and delegated those three positions, having them report directly to the president and CEO. He didn't change any bylaws to do that. They were already in place. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't destroyed anything. He's done what are in the parameters of his job. What they allow him to do is what he's done. Can we let him do his job? If the Packers go on an extended run of losing and he hires a coach who's clearly in over his head or doesn't turn the team around, then you can talk about how Mark Murphy blew it. But right now, what has he done? Maybe he waited a year or two too long to remove Ted Thompson. But other than that, the Packers are in really good shape, financially, for the future. I mean, relax, people. There are just as many decaffeinated brands on the market today that taste just as good as the real thing. I suggest researching them. Do you think McCarthy should have just been fired with Thompson last year? Julian, I will say I was surprised they didn't go that route. I was surprised they kept Mike around another year. Obviously, none of us knew about the extension that had been signed last October. They kept that quiet right up until the end of the season. But yes, I was a bit surprised that they didn't completely clean house. Obviously, Murphy believed that McCarthy could do the job. We saw Sean Peten go through 3 7-9 seasons and turn it around. We saw Bill Belichick not get to the Super Bowl for 10 years, etc. I think in Murphy's mind, he wanted to give McCarthy every chance to prove that he could turn it around, to show that he could turn it around. And obviously, that didn't happen last year. We need Clay to resign. I'm not quite sure which one you're saying there, Alexander. I'll be surprised if they do anything prior to free agency. I think they'll let him hit the market. Third contracts in Green Bay, as I always say, are a rare breed. Maybe they do something here before the end of the year, but I would be surprised. What do you want to see in the last 4 games? Cohesiveness, guys who want to play, a little energy. I thought they looked dead as doornails on Sunday, starting with the quarterback. It'd be nice to see some guys rallying for each other, if not the coach, because that certainly didn't happen when McCarthy was in there. I think Gutekunst is going to do well. Jonathan, early returns are good, but he's clearly got a big job ahead of him this offseason. A lot of decisions to be made on the roster, a big draft with lots of extra picks. This is his, as I've said pretty much all year, this upcoming offseason is when he will make the team his. It will be his imprint on the roster rather than some Thompson leftovers, etc. It will be his team. I would like for him to return. Thanks for answering. Alexander, no problem. I mean, I think he does help the team when he's out there. Clearly not the player he once was, but it'll be interesting to see how much money he thinks he's going to be able to get on the open market, because ultimately that's what will determine whether they bring him back or not. How long will turnaround time be with a new coach? That's an excellent question, Tyler. I think I was reading my friend Michael Cohen's chat over at The Athletic earlier this afternoon, where he posited that it would probably take a minimum 2 years. I don't think it's that long. I think they can turn it around pretty quickly with a good offseason, but they got to knock it out of the park. They obviously got to hire the right coach, and they got to make all the right moves in the draft and free agency. It's hard to bat 1,000, but if they can, hit around 700, they should be in for a quick turnaround. That said, a lot of it's going to depend on how that meshes, how that new coach, whatever system they bring in, married with whatever players Gutekunst, supplies for the coach to use. That's a lot of moving parts that got to fit quickly. I think history of the NFL would tell you it would probably take a year or two. But I think because Rodgers is who he is, you got that talent there, you do have some pieces to work with. I don't think it needs to be an elongated process. I think they can get back to the playoffs next year. But like I said, a lot has to fall into place. I put my money on Zach Taylor for the next head coach. DeMario, I really like him. I keep bringing him up. I mentioned him on the radio yesterday morning. My dream scenario, I mentioned it on the Packers Daily Chat, I believe earlier this week, maybe yesterday, would have Vic Fangio coming up from Chicago to be the head coach and Taylor to be the offensive coordinator. Taylor has some minimal amount of history/experience calling plays. He did so in Miami, funnily enough, for Joe Philbin. He's been a wide receivers coach and a quarterbacks coach out there in LA for Sean McVeigh. If he could bring in a similar system, it'd be exciting to watch, no doubt about it. Is it possible Philbin gets interim label removed if Packers perform well these 4 games? Matt, I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely. I think it's a bit of a stretch to go and watch this team all year on offense. He is the offensive coordinator, or has been up to this point, and then to turn around and after 4 games say, well, you know what? You clearly weren't the problem all year. Now, only the people on the inside know what his input has been. Mark Murphy is probably, obviously much more informed when it comes to that, but it would be a surprise to me, no matter how well they play down the stretch here, for him to be named the next head coach. Eric sleeping with Bieniemy. Yeah, Brian, he's going to be a hot name, no doubt about it. Only his first year as a coordinator there in Kansas City. Clearly that's a bit of a title that gives him the stamp of approval, so to speak, from Andy Reid, though he doesn't call the plays. Matt Nagy at least had some play calling experience before he got hired in Chicago. It'll be interesting to see what kind of interest he garners, not only in Green Bay, but around the league. All accounts, he's a very good coach. I just don't know how much the Packers are going to put into, that experience with Reid. Clearly is helping Nagy. Reid's coaching tree is a successful one. We'll see if Murphy feels strongly enough to bring him in for an interview. Should they go after veteran wide receivers in free agency? Tyler, they did last offseason, so I would think they'll probably try again. Remember, it came down to a choice between the Bears and the Packers, according to Allen Robinson, and he chose Chicago. Obviously, they were in on Sammy Watkins as well. So I would think they'll probably continue to look outside the organization, especially now that they know they're going to be bringing in an entirely new system. It's not like they have to have guys who have been working with Rodgers and McCarthy. They can go out and get somebody, and if they end up getting a coach who brings in an established system from someplace else, maybe they look for guys with experience in said system. Do you think Rodgers will redo contracts so he have money for players? No. Aaron Rodgers played at a discount for a very long time. There was a stretch there where guys like Mark Sanchez were making more money than he was. The Packers didn't rush to give him more money in that stretch. No. Rodgers has earned the money he's getting, and he will continue to do so. How desirable is this job, says Matt in all caps. I think it's pretty damn desirable. Obviously, there are issues and things you got to deal with, like any other job in the NFL, but there are still only 32 of them. They've got a future Hall of Famer in place at quarterback, and they've got some really good pieces to work with. Now, is there a lot of work to be done? Yes, of course, but that's not unlike anywhere else in the NFL. It's not like you're walking into the Bills job. I think this is an attractive proposition for anybody who spent their life trying to reach the mountaintop, which is being a head coach in the NFL. This upcoming year is going to be crucial for Kevin King's future with Green Bay, given his constant injuries. Ryan, I would totally agree. He's got to be able to show that these have been fluke injuries more than a pattern. Now, that's hard to say. He's sitting on the outside without access to the medical information, but his availability has been suspect, and it hinders their ability on the defensive side of the ball. There's no doubt about that. They are or have been a much better team when he is on the field. But the problem, of course, is that he hasn't been. So we'll see whatever adjustments he can make, maybe to his training regimen, etc. But he's got probably one more year to turn it around and prove that he can stay healthy. Fangio to Green Bay as head coach. I just mentioned that, actually. Thanks for joining us. If Tomlin gets fired, would he be the front runner? I don't know if he'd be a front runner, but he'd be an awfully attractive candidate. I would love to have Tomlin as a head coach. No doubt he is still one of the better coaches in the NFL. I know he's had his ups and downs in Pittsburgh, much like McCarthy in Green Bay, but I would absolutely sign up for Tomlin as head coach of the Packers. King said his shoulder has been popping out since college. Absolutely, it has been. Does it make sense to not see what we have in Kaiser? I mean, you really want to put Kaiser out there for 4 games? They're paying Aaron Rodgers to play football. Let him go play football. Thoughts on the potential for growth from the young players during the offseason to next year? There's lots of potential, tons of potential. What I'm really interested to watch is what kind of growth they get from those rookies to the second year. Not just the guys who have shown this year, guys like Alexander and the 2 rookie wide receivers, but guys you didn't really hear from, like Jamal Moore. Oren Burks hasn't played a ton of snaps. He's played here and there in spot duty, but I'd like to see those guys take the jump, so to speak. A lot's going to be made. We've already been asked about going out and getting free agent wide receivers. Well, they did just draft 3 of them. So let's see what kind of jump those guys can make as well. Who is your dark horse candidate? Joe Witt Jr., baby. He's not going to get an interview, but I would love it if he did. Let's go over to Twitter. Let's see what's on the minds of the old tweet machine. Michael starts us off with, if special teams has another blunder, heck, they will have another blunder. Can you see Philbin telling Zook that he is no longer needed? I'd be very surprised if they fired anybody else. I think the house cleaning they were going to do has been done. They're going to keep everybody in place till the end of the season. That would be my guess. Now watch him fire Ron Zook tonight, now that I've said that. Not really a question, but rather a comment. The narrative and pressure has now been flipped, or will be flipped nationally onto Rodgers. Whereas before, the national narrative pressure had been Green Bay wasting away Rodgers' prime. I've got to agree with that, Matt. There's been a lot, and that kind of goes as an overarching thing for Packers fans in general. Everything the Packers fans have been yelling about and bitching about for the last 2-3 years has now been done. Dom Capers has been fired. Mike McCarthy is gone. Ted Thompson has been replaced. Now it's Aaron Rodgers, and he's got to make it work. Because this has all been done because of the window they perceive to be, have. The perception is. However you want to phrase it, that's the perception, and Rodgers has got to deliver. They've got a new GM, going to have a new coach, new system, all the impediments, all the problems have been swept away. The defense, the defensive coach, Capers, oh God, they got to get rid of Capers. It's all been done. Now Rodgers, it will be on him to deliver. No question. Thoughts on Pat Fitzgerald as the next coach? Nick, I did see his name mentioned in I believe the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel as a possible fit. I know Tom wrote that it's probably almost a foregone conclusion that he gets a call simply because there's the obvious tie with Mark Murphy, having hired him there at Northwestern. Defensive-minded head coach, which would probably give you pause, along with the fact that he's coming up from the college ranks. But, there is that connection. And, interesting little tidbit, Fitzgerald's agent is Bob Harlan's son. Another Packer connection there for you. Well, who knows? I think he's a dark horse at best. I'd be surprised if he was, down the stretch became a serious contender, but crazier things have happened. Refresh my memory. More toxic relationship at the end. Brett Favre, Mike Sherman, or Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy? I'd go with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy. I mean, Mike Sherman kind of bent over backwards to give Brett whatever he wanted almost all the time, including allowing him in a totally different dressing room and to have catered lunches during the week, practice with the broadcast team, etc. Mike McCarthy, he and Aaron just maybe didn't get along or didn't see eye to eye on the system. Aaron Rodgers passively, aggressively taking shots at him in the media. I mean, Favre didn't do a whole lot of that with Sherman. Let's see what's going back on over here at the live chat. Forget head coach, lead candidate to replace Zook. William, that's a really good question. I do not know the answer to that because it would really depend on who the head coach is. Have had perceived it did. Yeah, right. Why do you think Rodgers has thrown so many balls in the dirt this year? Zach, I know he swears blind that the knee is not affecting him, but it has to be. That's the only thing I can think of as far as how often you see him not stepping into it. His mechanics where he's falling away, not getting the power, not following through, more flick of the wrist than pointing on follow through would indicate it sure looks like, if you watch, all of his snaps, say in a cut up, you see him constantly finding ways not to put pressure on that front foot and or that knee. So I gotta think that is causing some of the inaccuracy, especially on those throws wide outside, short yardage situations where he's got to hit a guy quick. He's throwing it and while he's falling away and the ball is just dying on him. So, that's just sitting on the outside, not having access to the information that Aaron has, that the coaches have, that the medical staff has. But it's the one thing I can think of where it's not just him not caring, because I don't think it's that. So until he fesses up, so to speak, about the knee, maybe that happens this offseason. Maybe he gets a procedure on it, and it turns out it's much worse than they've been letting on. It's the only thing I can think of. Is there a coach out there, Travis? Yes, there is. Nice hat, thanks. This is a nod to the OG Cheesehead TV. I used to wear a cap like this when Corey and I first started doing transplants, and everyone made fun of it every week, so I kept wearing it because I liked it. And I don't care what people think. Donnerson to active roster, Campbell to IR. Yep, that came out right before we went live. As I said on Twitter, deck chairs, Titanic, etc. Is there a crazy scenario where we do make the playoffs? Explain yes or no. Anthony, it would take way too long to explain, but yes, there is. If you go on my Twitter feed last night, I retweeted the really insane path to the playoffs that the Packers still have. And it is insane. But it still exists. They are still mathematically alive. Urban Meyer, 3 exclamation points. Steve, no, more exclamation points. It's his injury last season, not his knee, that's ruined Rodgers. Well, Chase, I think that's a bit of a simplification, maybe. There's certainly things where you look and you see the underthrows where you think, wow, that looks a lot like last year in that Carolina game when he came back from the collarbone injury. But you also see huge plays like the bomb to Adams in Seattle where you look and think, okay, maybe his arm's okay. It's too involved and too intricate to just give it a one-size-fits-all answer, at least to me. McDaniel's going to slither his way to 1265. It's possible. Very possible. Could Fangio and Peten work together if hired? Could they? Sure. I would be very surprised if Fangio got the gig if he kept Mike Peten around. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I would think Fangio would, hire his own crew and bid Peten adieu. Will Joe Witt be gone with a new head coach? To be determined, but most likely, yes. Now, if they go with a offensive wunderkind, so to speak, and they keep Mike Peten around, Peten could choose to keep Witt around, but that's a lot of steps we got to go through yet. Any coach get Rodgers to be more accountable? Well, that's a good question, Big Mike. Look, we have no idea what is or isn't being said behind closed doors. I did find it interesting that Winston Moss, the associate head coach of the Green Bay Packers, did tweet this afternoon about the need for whichever new coach comes in to hold 12 accountable, specifically calling out the quarterback needing to be held to account. I found that very interesting. Now, again, we don't know what's being said behind closed doors or what isn't being said behind closed doors. As far as accountability in Aaron Rodgers, I will say he has done more talking in the press this year after games during the week about his need to play better than he has most past seasons. Now, obviously, his play has warranted his needing to say something, but I've found that interesting that, people keep talking about a lack of accountability for Aaron Rodgers, and publicly, this is the most accountability I've seen from Rodgers as far as when he's making mistakes and not playing up to his standard, etc. He's been very forthcoming about that. Now, behind closed doors, I would tend to believe, and my guess is, that he's being allowed to kind of play the way he wants and changing plays, throwing mechanics, etc., where I think Moss is maybe indicating there, a little peek behind the curtain to say someone's got to come in and get this guy right, get him back to basics, break him down, build him back up, which is what we've been talking about here on this chat pretty much all year. Do the Packers still need a number one corner? Ernesto, I don't know if it's as simple as they need a number one corner. I think they need probably another corner if Kevin King can't stay on the field. But I think with King and Alexander, they've got a really good duo. Potentially one of the better duos in the league, but they got to get King to stay on the field. And, that's not to discount what Jackson could do in the future, et cetera. But right now, I think they've got a good nucleus. They just got to keep King healthy. Will you be there? ? Right, will I be where? Do you think Mcveigh has a chance to leave LA for the Packers? Crazier things have happened. I don't know why he would want to. That team is on the rise, largely because of him. He can probably write his own check next time his contract's up there in LA. He's got one of the richest owners in the league as his boss. Brand new stadium coming. Excitement around the Rams is sky high. I don't know why he would want to leave that to come live in the cold and deal with a aging quarterback, superstar quarterback. I mean, who knows? Possibly, but I'd be surprised. How much do you trust sources close to the team, quote, et cetera, in pieces? It really depends on the author and what I know of their sourcing. There are some guys who I know who have pretty good juice as far as who they talk to inside the building. A lot of the national people, I just kind of ignore it, unless it's like Jay Glazer, who always has stuff cold. But, I think it's funny that people are so quick to dismiss it with some of the local guys. Those are the guys that are typically the most juiced in. But, Ted Thompson and Russ Ball did a very, very good job of getting most of those types of people out the door, people who would talk to the media. They do a good job at 1265 Lombardi of shutting things down in that regard. I know Aaron Rodgers mentioned it to Mike Silver a couple years ago in a piece Silver did for NFL.com, where Rodgers said specifically that they had done a good job of getting out people out of the organization who had spoken to the media or who were sources, et cetera. But they still exist. They're still around. And, you just got to know who to look for. I think if you get a quote from Bob, from Spoon, from Pete, I think those are the stalwarts where, they've been around for so long. A lot of the coaches, a lot of the personnel people, I trust it when they say it, when they write it, so to speak. No reporters finally being hard enough on Murphy yesterday because he's in the wrong. What are you talking about? All they did was ask him about why he wasn't going to give Gutekunst the ability to hire the coach. You're obsessed over the silliest thing in the world. Winston hasn't developed a good player since Clay, LMAO, get his ass out of Green Bay. Alex Roundtree checking in. Heard from McCarthy, not a peep yet. You could kind of read between the lines talking about sourcing. Jim's piece, he had a good TikTok at PackersNews.com about the kind of timeline of how things happened when Mike was fired. They had sources, or a source, or multiple sources talking about basically McCarthy's side of things. You could tell they either got it from McCarthy or McCarthy's agent. We're talking about sourcing. There's a good example. But publicly, there's been nothing from Mike McCarthy, and I don't think there probably will be. Maybe he does a sit-down with Jay Glazer sometime this afternoon. I know they're really good buddies, or some other media outlet. But publicly, we haven't heard from Mike at all. Kelvin Benjamin to Green Bay. Sam, anytime you got got a chance to bring in a bad locker room guy who's grossly overweight and doesn't play football very well, you got to take it, right? I'm kidding, kind of. I don't want Kelvin Benjamin at all. Do you think McCarthy takes a year off? I don't, actually, Andrew. I know I've had a couple people ask me that kind of question. I'd be very surprised. I think he loves coaching still. I think he got tiresome and bogged down in Green Bay, but I think he would relish a new start. And look, I know he'll probably interview in Cleveland. He'll probably interview with the Jets. Those are two places where he could, work with a young, talented quarterback. Yeah, I'd be very surprised if he took a year off. That's not to say he won't, but it would surprise me. He's a Popeye's biscuit away from being a tight end. Andrew, that's funny. Who has the most to play for in December on the roster? Michael, I think the obvious answer is going to be most of the young guys. I think somebody like Tanyan could really make an impression here. I'm very interested to see, personnel-wise, you ask about who's got the most to play for, who gets on the field that maybe wasn't getting on the field under Mike. Maybe Philbin loosens the reins a little bit, so to speak, and gets a little bit more liberal with his distribution for some of these young players. Guys like Tanyan, some of the young corners, get Jackson on the field a little bit more, etc. I don't know. That'll be interesting. Maybe some of those offensive linemen. Maybe Alex Light finally sees the light of day, so to speak, etc. Now, obviously, you still got to protect Rodgers, and you still got to make the offense work. So, I'd be surprised if it was too drastic. But to me, getting those young guys on the field and how they do so is something to watch over the course of this next month. Travis Black, Kumaro. Yeah, I guess Kumaro has a lot to play for, but we saw what we saw in the preseason. It wasn't a mystery. I think he can operate in this offense. I was surprised they didn't use him more than 5 snaps than they did on Sunday, especially when he got early drops from the other rookies. Well, he's not a rookie, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I would love to see more Kumaro. Again, that's what I'm looking for from Philbin, how much he kind of shakes things up personnel-wise, if he does it all. Has there been a week Alex Light wasn't inactive? I don't think so, Doug. Thoughts on the Chiefs OC as a head coach candidate in Green Bay? Marshall, I talked about it at the start of the video. So watch the replay and you'll get the answer to that. If McDaniels has the red flags for leaving the Colts, but having him as a coach he could rope in Rodgers because of his Super Bowls and his work with Tom Brady. Chris, I don't think that was a question, but I just read it. Yeah, there are red flags there. Obviously, the leaving the Colts at the last second last year leaves a bitter taste, and is definitely a red flag. But you see how he's worked with Brady, and that has been a very fruitful relationship. You got to think he could do something with Aaron Rodgers. All I want is a win. DeMario, I couldn't agree more. Sick of the losing. To quote associate head coach Winston Moss, hashtag sick of losing. Or sick of the losing, you might have said. Anyway, that'll do it for today's chat. Thanks a lot, everyone. Sorry if I couldn't get to your question. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook, contribute to our Patreon if you like what we do. We've got tons of content for you each and every day. A bunch of Packer fans who are devoted to other Packers fans. If you like it, share it, love it, learn it, invest in it. Thanks a lot, everyone. We're devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide here at Cheesehead TV, including you, all of you. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good night.